Hey everyone, welcome back to Correlation Nation. Now that the early slate's kicked off, I want to go ahead and jump back into the main slate. That way you guys have time to go over it, gather as much information as you possibly can, do your own research, whether that's checking BBP on some of these teams that correlate or some of the pitchers, and just go from there. I mean, with that being said, we'll just go ahead and jump right back into it. With the early slate, not the early slate's kicked off. Now that we're into the main slate, we have 13 games. The first game's going to be Toronto at Baltimore. And let me get into these pitchers so you can see. Kevin Gausman, he's a guy that looks fairly well on paper. His season-long stats is a 4.99 ERA. He's got 10 wins, 9 losses, 140 Ks. His WHIP's 159. Fantasy points per game, he averages 12.4. And really what I'm more impressed with, though, than his season-long stats is actually his recent stats. In the past month, he has an 8.13 K9 with a 3.48 ERA. And so he's been doing pretty well. And he's facing off with Toronto, which Toronto had a big day yesterday. However, these strike out at a 22.5%. And I think you could attack Toronto a little bit with Kevin Gausman. I mean, he's not a guy I would be using a ton of, but he's definitely a guy you could look into. And he's facing off with Joe Biagini. And he has a pretty high ERA at a 5.4 ERA. Let's go into his season-long stats, see what he's done. He's 3-9, not good. 5.4 ERA, same thing. Oh, and that is actually a season-long because I believe it's been over a month since the last time he's pitched, so there were no recent stats on him. Same thing with like Clayton Kershaw. I actually had to pull up. Some minor league stats for Dylan Peters and Jack Flaherty. Season long for Chris Stratton. I know he's pitched recently, but I don't know if it was enough to be on the average, and or you know what I mean, the limit. So, but anyways, Joe Biagini is a guy that I would be looking to attack with Baltimore. Baltimore, they correlate very well, as you can see right here. In the past 2 weeks, he put up 85 runs, 30 home runs. They just correlate in all areas, whether that's recent success, going against a poor pitcher, the pitcher's ERA is not good. So they are definitely an offense that I would be looking to stack, Baltimore. And what you could do is just see what the Baltimore individual batting stats are or splits are against right-handed pitching. That's what I would do. Or you could even see if there's any BBP on Joe Biagini. So you guys make, you know what I mean, you guys do what you want to do. The next game we have is Boston at New York Yankees. And Doug Fister looks pretty good. His recent stats are very well. 8.44 K9 with a 3.71 ERA. I'm not sure. His season-long stats don't look so good. He's a 4.53 ERA. He's only won 3 games out of 10. 51 strikeouts. A 1.37 WHIP. Only 10, almost 11 fantasy points per game. So, I mean, he's been better lately. However, I know I was looking at this earlier, and New York is actually an offense that doesn't look bad on paper. Their splits in this particular situation look pretty good. So I don't know that I would be attacking him a whole lot, even though Doug Fister has been pitching better lately. New York, they don't strike out a ton. 18.5. So I don't think I would use Doug Fister. However, Sonny Gray is a guy you could look at too. His recent stats are pretty decent. A 7.8 K9 with a 2.7 ERA, and if you look at his season long stats, he's got a 3.26 ERA with 8 wins, 8 losses, 120 Ks, a 118 WHIP, and averages nearly 18 fantasy points per game. Those are all very good stats. Boston is a pretty good offense for the most part. You don't strike out a ton either, the 19.6. But he's not a huge, I mean, he does strike people out, but I think he's really just a better pitcher overall. I mean, I'd be a little scared. I don't know that he'd be one of my favorite guys to use, but I mean, you could think about it. I'll probably stay away from these guys. They're not going to be some of my main guys. The next game we have is going to be Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. And we have Luis Castillo facing off with Garrett Cole. Lewis has very good stats, 9.82 K9 with a 2.76 ERA. His season long is a 3.26 ERA, 83 strikeouts. He doesn't win very many games, apparently. He averages just over 18 fantasy points per game. I think he's a guy that you could definitely look at using. Pittsburgh, they don't strike out a ton on their season long, but I was actually really surprised when I was looking at their past 2 weeks. They've actually been striking out quite a bit here lately, 23.1%. And Luis Castillo, he correlates in a lot of areas. He's not a guy that came up on my initial list, but once I started doing other correlating stats, he popped up. And behold, he correlates in all these areas. He is a guy I would look to use. Garrett Cole. Let's see. Garrett Cole, 9.18 K9, a 4.05 ERA, and that's over the past month. His season long is a 3.99 ERA, 11 wins, 8 losses, 154 Ks. His WHIP, 1.23, and averages just over 16 fantasy points per game. Cincinnati's not an offense I like to attack. When their lineup comes out, and if you see that they don't have very many good hitters in it, then you could think about it. However, I won't. I mean, unless that does happen, he's not a guy I'm looking to use. He's at the very bottom of my list. He came up in one category. Cincinnati, their K rate's 20.8%. So, not great, not bad. Just kind of middle of the road. The next game we have is going to be Cleveland at Detroit. And this is the doubleheader. We have Mike Clevinger. And in the past month, he's been great. He's got a 12K9, 3.86 ERA. His season long is 3.72 ERA. 7 wins, 5 losses, 108 Ks, a 1.31 WHIP, and averages just over 15 fantasy points per game. He's a guy that I would look to use. I know that when I look at the stats or the correlation, Mike Clevinger is a guy that looks very well on paper. Detroit, they strike out at a 24.8% rate, and he correlates in all areas. So look to get Mike Clevinger in some of your lineups, as well as Luis Castillo. He's facing off with Buck Farmer. Old Buck. a 6.17 ERA season long, 3 wins, 1 loss, 25 Ks, a 1.29 WHIP, and averages nearly 13 fantasy points per game. He has a high ERA. He has a high K9. He's a guy that could do well. However, again, Cleveland comes up down here at the bottom. The recent success, 76 runs, 24 home runs. The guy just has a high ERA. So you could probably find some one-offs from this Cleveland Indians ball club. And that's probably what I would do. I expect Cleveland to win that game. But again, it is professional sports, so you never know. The next game we're going to look at will be Philadelphia in Miami. And Nick Pivetta does not look good. He has a 11.57 ERA. He has a very high 10.09 K9 as well, though. He's facing off with Dylan Peters. This guy is being brought up from the minors. He actually looks pretty darn good. I was looking at his stats, and these are his minor stats right here. He's a 7.88 K9 with a 1.97 ERA. He's a guy that you could probably use. Honestly, he's probably extremely cheap. He's facing Philadelphia, which Philadelphia has been good lately. But that doesn't negate the fact that they haven't been good before that, and they still strike out a ton. 25.7%. Dylan Peters, a guy that you might look to use. Miami, let's see how their offense looks. Miami's a team that you might consider. I mean, Pivetta having such a high ERA warrants that. They've only put up 61 runs, but they've hit 20 home runs, so they're a team you could check out. The next game is going to be Los Angeles Anaheim Angels at Texas. Tyler Skaggs facing off Cole Hamels, and Tyler Skaggs, he has a 7.36 K9 with a 4.56 ERA over the past month. Cole Hamels has a 5.13 K9 with a 3.24 ERA, so a pretty good ERA. I think he was supposed to play yesterday, and I don't know what happened. I know I had him in my notes yesterday, though. Anyways, I don't really like either of these guys. I probably won't use either of them. Let's see, Tyler Skaggs, he does come up here at the top. So I mean, as far as splits goes, he's there. The Rangers are striking out at a 22% rate right now, and they have all season. I mean, not necessarily 22%, but they strike out. But Skaggs is just a middle-of-the-road pitcher. He's a guy you might be able to find success with, but I'm not going to be looking for that. Texas, no thank you. LA is a team that look good on paper for the most part. I mean, they don't have the greatest matchup as far as their opposing pitcher. However, the recent success there, and then the guy just doesn't strike out a lot of people. They don't strike out a lot. So you could look for him to put up probably between 3 and 5 runs. So if you find the right batters from the Angels, use them. If you think you know who they are, put them in your lineup. The next game is going to be Kansas City Royals in Minnesota facing the Twins. And Jason Hamill, he's not looking so good. He's negative. His WAR is negative. He's got a 6.9 K9, a 4.8 ERA. Not very good numbers. Season long, 4.76 ERA. So not much better. 6 wins, 10 losses, 116 strikeouts, a 1.33 whip, almost 12 fantasy points per game. And he's facing Minnesota. Minnesota has been very good of late. They have been one of the top offenses. They're right here. Sorry. Minnesota's right here. 95 runs, 28 home runs. They correlate in a couple different areas. And they're an offense I'd probably look to use against against Jason Hamill. And Dylan Gee is a guy that's looked pretty good. Over the past month, he has an 8.34 K9 with a 3.18 ERA. His season long is 8.53 ERA, 31 strikeouts, a 1.29 whip, and averages nearly 9 fantasy points per game. Kansas City has been pretty awful lately. You can see their offense has not been doing much. 28 runs, 9 home runs. They are a team you can attack. That's what I think. That would be my best assessment of this situation. Is that you could use Dylan Gee. The next game we have is Blake Snell of the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's facing off with Ronaldo Lopez of the White Sox. They'll be in Chicago. Blake Snell, he has an 8.31 K9 with a 2.97 ERA. His season-long stats are not quite as well. A 4.29 ERA. He's lost 6 games out of 8. He has 87 strikeouts, a 1.41 whip, and averages just around 12.5 fantasy points per game. He's facing the White Sox, which they're not a very good offensive team. I think you could use Snell a little bit. He correlates a little bit. White Sox over the past 2 weeks have striked out at 25.1%. And Ronaldo Lopez, this guy has a 10.45 K9 with a 6.97 ERA. And he's only been pitching in the majors here for 2 or 3 games, I think. He looks pretty he looks like he has pretty good strikeout stuff, but he's gonna have to learn to keep people from getting contact because people are putting a lot of runs up. He has a 6.97 ERA, as I've already said, and I think you could actually attack him. Like Tampa Bay is not a team that I really like offensively a whole lot, but I think you could use him. I mean, 57 runs, 25 home runs, and they would be pretty contrarian, I would think. So, find the right bats from Tampa Bay, put them in your lineup. The next game we'll be going to will be Washington in Milwaukee. Tanner Roark. He has a 7.84 K9 with a 3.48 ERA. He's facing off with Jimmy Nelson, and he has a 9.71 K9 with a 5.46 ERA. That ERA is pretty scary, but he's a good pitcher, so I mean, don't be fooled. The guy can pitch a very good game. I don't know if he's just been getting blown up in the past month, but he's still a very good pitcher. I mean, let's go to his season-long stats. Yeah, he has a 3.75 ERA, 10 wins, 6 losses, 181 strikeouts, a 1.27 whip, averages nearly 19 fantasy points per game. He's not a guy I want to attack. Even though he has that high ERA, he's not a guy I want to attack. Washington, they strike out at a 21.4% rate, and if anything, Jimmy Nelson might be somebody you could use. I mean, Washington, they've put up decent offense lately, 69 runs, only 7 home runs though. It's just like, which side do you want to pick on that deal? That's really what it is. Do you think Washington's a better offense than Jimmy Nelson is a pitcher, or vice versa? I mean, you make your best judgment. I probably won't be using Jimmy Nelson, and I probably won't be using Washington. The next game we have is going to be Arizona in Colorado, and we have Taijuan Walker, 5.86 K9, not very good, with a 3.58 ERA, not so bad. And then Kyle Freeland has a 9 K9 with a 4.5 ERA. Walker's season long is 3.55 ERA with 7 wins, 7 losses, 110 strikeouts, a 1.3 whip, and averages 15 fantasy points per game. There's Taijuan Walker right there. Colorado's been striking out over the past 2 weeks at a 22% rate. And they're at home though. They're not really a team they're not a team I want to attack. And being that they do strike out and Walker's not like a huge strikeout guy, then I don't think that I really want to use Walker. Kyle Freeland is a guy though that I would consider using. I mean, his individual stats are pretty decent. He's got that 9K9, and he's got the 4.5 ERA, and his season long's even better. It's actually 3.81, and he has 11 wins, 8 losses, 94 Ks, a 1.4 whip, and averages just under 11.5 fantasy points per game. But Arizona do not hit left-handed pitching very well. They're away from home, and their splits show that they don't hit as well on the road. However, we are talking about Colorado, and Colorado is definitely a hitter's park. So I wouldn't really attack him a lot. I mean, Kyle Freeland's a guy that you could either use or you could attack. He's definitely not one of my favorite guys, though. The next game we have is going to be the Oakland Athletics facing off with the Mariners in Seattle. And it's going to be Sean Manaea. And his stats look awful. He's a guy I want to attack, period. 3.68 K9 with a 9.82 ERA. I mean, these are terrible. Look at them. Terrible. And on the other side, another pitcher that I want to attack. I mean, this game right here, Oakland in Seattle, this might be a game stack, everyone. Giovanni Gallardo, 6.39 K9 with a 7.46 ERA. Horrific. These guys look terrible. What have they done for me lately? Let's see. Oakland's offense looks pretty good as far as correlating. They correlate, and the pitcher they're going against just sucks. He has a high ERA, low strikeout percentage. They've only put up 50 runs and 19 home runs over the past 2 weeks, but we've all seen Oakland hit home runs, so I mean, you could try it. Seattle, like I said, game stack, just a game stack. Neither offenses are great. They haven't been great of late, but just the situation, the pitchers they're facing, that's really what draws me in. Other than that, I mean, the offenses aren't great, so I'm not like blown away by their recent success or what they've done lately, because they haven't really done a whole lot. But it only takes one day to change it all. And it looks like Gallardo's not even starting. Oh my goodness. So that's going to change. That's going to change my approach if that is the case. It looks like it's Mike Leake, which he's not a very good pitcher either. I know, because I'm from Missouri and I've watched him pitch for the Cardinals. He was actually pretty good at the beginning of the season. Everyone thought he was well, and now he's not so well. Anyways, there's not much I can say about that other than his season-long stats. If Mike Leake is starting, his season-long stats: 4.21 ERA, 7 wins, 12 losses, 103 strikeouts, a 1.33 WHIP, averages 11.5 fantasy points per game. He is a right-handed pitcher, and so is Gallardo. So the splits should stay the same. The only thing that will change is his recent K9 rate and his recent ERA. So if he's in the lineup, then you might want to do your due diligence and go check that out before loading up on Oakland bats. Anyways, in the next game we have the Dodgers in San Diego. Clayton Kershaw is going to pitch for the first time in quite some time. And I had to pull up his season-long stats. This isn't recent, but a 10.7, a K9 with a 2.04 ERA. That's what he's done for me this season. And he's facing off with Danielson Lamet. Or LeMay. I guess it depends on how you pronounce that. But he has a 9.53 K9 with a 2.54 ERA over the past month. Clayton Kershaw, again, these were his season-long stats, so you can see him right here. It says Dave Roberts, the manager, said Kershaw back will be on a lose 5-inning, 75-pitch limit in the first start back from disabled this Friday. So if Kershaw costs a bunch, even though he's a great pitcher in a great matchup, it really at that point it depends on how much he costs. Because if he's like 10 grand, then you could probably use him. No, he's 13.5. That pretty much puts Clayton Kershaw out of the equation for me. That's too much for too little. Sure, he can have a good game, but I don't know that he's going to pay off his salary at 13.5 if he's only pitching 5 innings. So that'll probably steer me away from Clayton Kershaw. He was a guy that I would have probably used, but after seeing that, I don't think I will. Danielson is a guy that looks good on paper. The Dodgers, let's see what they do. The Dodgers strike out at a 22.1% rate over the past month, 2 weeks. And let's see what their offense has done. They've been terrible. Over the past 2 weeks, LA has only put up 47 runs, 13 home runs. You can attack the Dodgers with Danielson. No one's going to want to do that. Clayton Kershaw's playing today. They're going to think the Dodgers are going to win. And heck, they still could. But I think their offense is attackable with this pitcher. He's a guy I'll look to use. He really is. After everything that I just showed you guys and showed myself, really, he's a guy I'll be considering. The last guy we have on the list, the last match is going to be St. Louis in San Francisco. Jack Flaherty facing off with Chris Stratton. Flaherty is being called up from the minors. The guy looks very good. 8.97 K9 with a 2.74 ERA. Obviously no season-long stats, being that he's just being called up. And again, we have another pitching change, it looks like. Johnny Cueto looks like he is in for San Francisco, not Chris Stratton. And I don't know that really changes a whole lot for me, because Stratton's been pretty good lately, but he's not a guy I really wanted to use. And the St. Louis offense isn't a team I really wanted to use a whole lot. So it doesn't change a lot for me as far as how I viewed the whole entire slate. It is going to change a little bit. I may look into Cueto's stats, but he does obviously season long have a 4.59 ERA with a 6.7 win-loss record, 103 strikeouts, a 1.4 WHIP, and averages just over 13.5 fantasy points per game. Let's see. Yeah, it really doesn't change a whole lot of anything for me. I'll be entirely honest with you. Nothing. I mean, there's Chris Stratton right there. But you can see there's really nothing correlating next to him. So, no thanks. So anyways, now that we've done that, I'm just going to kind of show you my actual favorite pitchers are going to be Luis Castillo. He's one of my favorites on the slate. Mike Clevinger is a guy that I'll be looking to use a little bit. Dylan Gee's a guy that you could put in consideration. Blake Snell's a guy you can put in consideration. Clayton Kershaw, if you want to pay the 13.5 and get 5 innings, go right ahead. I probably won't be doing so. Danielson is a guy that I'll be looking to use against the Dodgers. And you could probably even use this Jack Flaherty. He doesn't correlate a whole lot in any specific category, but he looks like a good pitcher on paper, and he's facing San Francisco in San Francisco, which is a pitcher's matchup, and you could probably get the guy extremely cheap. The guy costs 6.7, so that'll be my pitching for the day, really. Another guy that you could consider would be Ronaldo Lopez. He's got a pretty decent matchup, but he's in one of the matchups that, you know, you're going to have to pick one side or the other, or both, you know what I mean, flip-flop. I mean, he's in that type of matchup where Tampa Bay could blow him up, but the dude shows a lot of strikeout upside, and he's going against a team that strikes out a ton. So Ronaldo Lopez is a guy you could consider. Tanner Roark, he's another guy that you might consider just a little bit just because of his matchup. He's going against Milwaukee, and they strike out a lot in the past 2 weeks, 26.3%. I believe that's the highest on the slate. Dylan Peters is a guy you definitely might want to look and use. So anyways, we'll move on to hitting. Who's going to be our offensive stacks for the day? And I actually like to show the pitchers and show again that, like Nick Pivetta has a huge ERA, and he's a guy that I would like to attack. Buck Farmer's a guy that you might look to attack a little bit. Jason Hamill is a guy you want to attack a little bit. And I just mentioned Ronaldo Lopez. You know what I mean? He's a guy you either use or you attack. Sean Manaea is a guy that you want to attack. Giovanni was a guy I wanted to attack, but he's obviously not in the lineup, so that goes out the window. My absolute favorite stacks of the day are going to be Baltimore, a game stack of Seattle, Oakland. You could do a look into Chicago Cubs, Cleveland, Los Angeles Anaheim Angels, and you could look into Miami a little bit. Miami and New York Yankees, you could look into that matchup a little bit more. But really, for me, it's going to be Baltimore. They're the one that I really like. And then the Seattle-Oakland stack is one that I really like. Take what you want from it. Anytime I'm looking at my offenses, if it has 2 pink next to it, that means they've been really poor over the past 2 weeks. If it has 2 yellow, that means they've been really well. And even if it has one or the other, obviously on the far right, that's going to be home runs. On inside of that is going to be runs. And I just use that to help me to make my decisions. That's really all it is. Same thing over here. That's going to be, some of the better. And not like, I look at it. But, I'm looking at it, when I'm looking at this is from a pitcher's standpoint. So I want pitchers in matchups where it's a high strikeout percentage, you know what I mean? And then on the low ones, like if it was a guy I was looking at, like Jason Hamill's not really a guy I was really looking at, but based off splits, he ended up in here. He's not a guy I like, and I have even more reason not to like that matchup because Minnesota has not been striking out a whole ton over the past 2 weeks. And then same thing with Doug Fister. So I know I mentioned Doug Fister earlier. He's in a matchup too where New York Yankees, they don't strike out a whole lot. So you might tamper your, expectations. Same with Sonny Gray. But Luis Castillo, Blake Snell, Dylan Peters, Tanner Roark, early slate, not in the frickin' slate. Mike Clevinger, early slate. And Ronaldo Lopez. Well, everyone, I hope you guys can use this information and make it beneficial to you. I'm really hoping that all this work pays off. And I'll put together some lineups and I may share them on my Twitter account or some. Go ahead and follow me if you want. It's DFS_correlation. And with that, This is your host, Correlation Nation. I'm out.